Hello, my name is Paweł Szlachciński, and I'm glad that I can speak in front of you today. I would like you to present a presentation that I made for today's conference. It relates to the topics of relations between Catholic faith and scientific knowledge from philosophical perspective. And I would like to give some general ideas concerning organization of interactions between these two disciplines that could in future result in solving more specific cases and controversies. Science and faith have at least one thing in common. Both appeal to the cognition of truth. But what is the truth? The problem of its definition is examined by the branch of philosophy called epistemology, and intuitively it can be described as a quality of our cognition that guarantees that the object of our cognition is something that we think of. Historically, there were many definitions of truth. Parmenides, the creator of ontology, claimed that the truth is the being itself. But I must add that for him, being is not everything that is perceived by a human being. The real being is something one, unchangeable and static, that can be known by human only by purely rational speculation. The classical definition given by Aristotle states that intuitive meaning of truth states the intuitive meaning of truth. According to him, it is true to say that being is and that there is not non-being. Saint Thomas Aquinas defines truth in the same manner as an adequacy between content of thought and the being. Later in the history of philosophy, when method of gaining knowledge started to be the main object of philosophy, there was a growing tendency of asking rather when something is true than a question of what is the truth. Because of this tendency, the criteria of true knowledge were developed. For example, for Descartes, the obviousness guarantees truth of the sentence. Other criteria are coherence, empirical verifiability, utility of knowledge, or common agreement. This historical perspective suggests that even when we try to better understand what the truth is, we need to appeal to intuition, or we only create conventional rules of scientific behavior. Still, we know that the truth is ultimately connected with being and its relation to subject that is cognizing this being. Truth of faith is the revelation, which can be described as a supernatural truth given to humanity by God himself. For Catholics, it is the apostolic tradition and the Holy Bible presented to faithful by the magisterium of the Catholic Church, which determine dogmas that are believed by every Catholic. These unchangeable truths are explored by theological reflection through rational means. Theology appeals to the natural abilities of human mind in order to better understand the supernatural truths that are embraced by faith. This faith, of course, is supreme to reason, but it treats it as an instrument to better comprehend revelation. The goal of faith is not only to contemplate. Love to God is revealed in acts of faithful and their attitude towards neighbor. These actions should also be noticed by theology. Truth of the reason is complementary to faith. It is part of the one truth about God and his relation to created world. What is more, theology is not something additional to faith. It naturally arises from it, which is described by Saint Bonaventure. According to him, theology results from love to God whom the faithful trusted. God is the ultimate truth, and knowing him as much as we naturally can is an aim of theology. Although theoretical reflection concerning nature started probably in the 6th century before Christ and was created by Ionic philosophers, the beginning of modern natural sciences is dated back to 1687, the year of release of Sir Isaac Newton's The Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy. Since then, there has been a massive progress of our knowledge connected with development of technology that has been changing human lives entirely. This success of natural sciences is possible due to their empirical method. What does constitute it? First of all, it is intersubjectivity. Scientific activities and their results must be understood and no, not must, but may be understood and verified by anyone who has enough abilities that can be gained. What is more, truthfulness of sentences of scientific theorists must rely on sentences concerning empirical reality. It is achieved by methodological naturalism, which limits scientific explanation to this empirical reality. The criterion of demarcation between science and non-science is falsifiability of theory. It must be possible for scientific hypotheses to come out as false in empirical tests, which also implies that this hypothesis must imply empirically testable conclusions. This criterion was developed by Karl Popper, and although its practical use is not always non-controversial and needs using of conventions to determine when we should stop testing to claim that the hypothesis is valid, it is in my opinion good tool to distinguish science from pseudoscience. This perspective describes science from non-historical and purely logical perspective. But it was the Thomas Kuhn who developed other position. According to him, scientific evolution can be divided into two phases, normal phase and the phase of scientific revolution. In the first one, there are functioning assumptions concerning research and methodology that are constituted by paradigms, which are examples of good science. During this phase, new problems are found and solved according to these paradigms. However, some difficulties cannot be explained in the known manner. Then science goes through a period of scientific revolution. Major problems are solved, and these solutions start to be new paradigms in another normal phase. Although Kuhn was accused of irrationalism, his ideas that there is a non-linear development of scientific knowledge are important, and we need to take them into account. Science is then an evolutionary process of acquiring knowledge about phenomenal reality. To understand the relation between science and being, we firstly need to ask what is the relation between our knowledge and reality. First of all, we perceive reality as something one. Our experience concerns only one world. On the other hand, our cognition takes place by concepts, which are represented in language. Conversational language concerns many different types of our experience. However, it turns out to be too shallow when we try to think about something more specific. That's what. Oh. What? Continue. Okay. So. I believe it is justified to say that we have an intuition of being as a whole of reality, but to understand it we need to consider only part of it. This process is called abstraction. We abstract some elements of reality in an act of cognition and create new language that can describe it. However, we must remember that abstract knowledge is only part of reality, so that it cannot explain it fully. I believe that it is an aim of philosophy to combine abstract knowledge from different fields into one holistic approach to reality. Abstract knowledge should be a tool of this philosophical reflection. However, there must be balance between autonomy of abstract sciences and interactions between them. Some of them are more general than others and give more fundamental insights into nature of reality. For example, mathematics and logic. I think that's all about abstract knowledge. Now we have to compare it with philosophy. As it was said before, the goal of theology is to contemplate religious truths by means of human mind. However, these truths are not limited to some area of reality. From theological perspective, created world is also a subject of theology. It is an element of God's plan of salvation. I think then that because of this superiority, one of the aims of theology should be mentioned organization of an abstract knowledge into one holistic approach to reality. What's important, this knowledge can't contradict faith. It means that whenever it seems that revelation contradicts valid scientific knowledge, we have to keep in mind that revealed truth is rather general than specific. So, when in the Bible there are fragments with references to the ancient image of the world, we need to remember that the topic of cosmology in Holy Scripture is not the specific nature of the universe, but the truth that this universe was fully created by God ex nihilo. This metaphorical interpretation is nothing new. It was developed by St. Augustine in the 4th century. This unity of faith and reason was later said by St. Anselm, the father of scholastics, in his famous motto, Fides querens intellectum, faith looking for understanding. Fideism as a rejection of reason by faith is, in my opinion, anti-Catholic. It is true that faith is before the rational reasoning, but without understanding, faith becomes blind. Using reason enables us to better understand the truth of faith and then better understand surrounding reality described by abstract knowledge. So I believe that my presentation can be summarized in this one sentence. It should be a philosophical role of theology to organize abstract scientific knowledge according to religious truths, respecting autonomy of each branch of intellectual effort in its own abstract field, in order to create an accurate image of the world and creation in the light of their ultimate purpose, which is the God, the Supreme Being, and salvation. Thanks for your attention.